this is an idea that is being discussed. Now, we know it's being discussed now at the AFL. It was something we spoke about on this very show before the first game, that a way of keeping players off planes in that time would be maybe to have a whole lot of teams playing games maybe 5 days apart. We used the example of using Perth. We've now got to a stage where we look around and you go, you know what, this could actually work. Tasmania needs money, needs their football because of the money they put into the game. They could be the first 3 states, Tasmania, South Australia and WA, to come out of social isolation. Why not get the season started and maybe get a couple of weeks of footy away?
Well, that's certainly right. I think the AFL is also looking at Southern Queensland and Northern Queensland. The Northern Territory, I think you spoke about this earlier in the week, only one ground and some vulnerabilities with the Indigenous population. But what interests me is that I think this is a bit further down the track than people realise. I know that Travis Auld, who is sort of the fixture man, and Steve Hocking, the football man, they're looking at numbers. Would it be 30 players? You'd nominate 30 players who would go with you to the quarantine. That's just a nominal number. Every club could nominate the core number of football staff. They could choose assistant coaches, medicos. There'd be a central medical team, a central umpires team, a central broadcast team. And players would stay, Ross, at health resorts. They would stay at hotels. They would stay at universities. There's all manner of places that they could go. Do you like the idea?
Yeah, I really do. And from a coach and a club perspective, the situation we're going through now, this is going to go in the history books. What a way to build resilience. The buzzwords connection brings them together. You go away and you build a reputation as a club and a player group. I've heard the asterisks around premierships. If this season gets up and going, the team that can handle this situation and deliver will have really earned the premiership. We
spoke about the asterisks last week. Matthew Lloyd, I just want to go to you before we go to Caroline Wilson in a moment. You mentioned the asterisks last week. Now, are you starting to change your mind, Matty, that this is actually going to be a real test to win this premiership? I reckon they should give 2 premiership cups this year.
Not if it's 12 games still, Ed. No. I think that, I understand all the challenges we're going to have, but still, I want to see more than a 12-game home and away season to justify this year's premiership, but still, I'll stand and applaud if that does happen, but I want to see at least that 15 to 17 game mark that Gillon McLachlan spoke about right at the start of the press conference a number of weeks ago.
So Ross Lyon likes the idea, but the president of the Players Association does not. This is Patrick Dangerfield on SEN the other day.
You know, we've got to do the right thing by the community and set the right example, and I think, you know, round 1 was a good example of the angst that playing created, and I just think to do something like that when everyone else was still in lockdown, there would need to be a huge amount of thought go into it. And I'm not sure how comfortable I would be with it.
There was a view, Matthew, that the players are not as resilient as... I mean, you look at Olympic sportsmen, you look at... you watch the Test documentary, cricketers. The AFL's talking to Premier League soccer. They're talking to sports all around the world, all of whom are trying to get their sport started again. Would you be happy leaving your family for 5 or 6 weeks?
Well, I look at it, Caro, and I know Patrick's got a very young family and he's open to his opinion on it. Sometimes, though, I ask the question, who's he speaking for? Is it in his role as the president of the players, or is it actually him as just a Geelong footballer? It sounded like that was his own personal opinion there, but they're going to have 10 weeks with their families that they never would have got otherwise. So I think they just have to get on with it. If the hubs come in and they say you've got to go for 4 or 5 weeks, you just got to do it because it's getting the game going. And I just love the responses here from David Teague and John Worsfold, who understand the bigger picture, and it's getting their staff back into work. So by playing anywhere is what we need to do. Take a listen to David and John Worsfold.
I love the innovation. I love the thoughts. As a club, you're trying to prepare for as much as possible, but you're also, with so much speculation, you can't spend too much time on each proposition at the moment. But if it gets the game up and going, I'm all for it.
People are passionate, and we said this is the only way you're going to play out this footy season. I think majority of players would be keen to be involved. The way I'm wired, I would be saying, let's get it going.
How do you feel, Ross, about it? I wouldn't be surprised with what those coaches had to say. How do you feel about what Paddy Dangerfield had to say there about being a little bit uncomfortable?
Well, I think where they've got to be careful, the AFLPA, is that the pay cut got messy, even though the intention was strong. There was a look from the outside that there was a misalignment. So this hub issue is the new one, and their starting point, I think, has got to be yes, and trust the leadership of the Commission, the AFL, club presidents, that health and safety is going to be ticked off, and it's going to sit within what the rest of the community is doing. So I think their challenge, Paul Marsh and Patrick, you wear a few hats. We want to see you aligned and fully committed and not be in a silo. And I don't think they are, but I think it's the risk. As media, we'll look for division, and that's their real challenge, to come across as aligned and committed.
We'll speak to Paul Marsh in a few moments' time.
Caroline, I'm in.
He's in.
Welcome to the club.
Just a little bit. I just want to, just my reading of what Patrick said yesterday with Gerard. And I think they were both talking to each other, and I think they just were going off on a tangent that's not there. Both of them said almost as if we were going to break out of lockdown and we were going to be an organisation doing its own private thing. No, we're talking about this as we emerge out of lockdown, if these states come out of it first. So lockdown is over. And I think that changes the thoughts on it.
Which the AFL made clear when they put out this memo to the... You would have got it, obviously, last night. And the AFL basically said they are not going to do anything. It's going to come up on screen in a minute. They're not going to do anything until the federal, state and territory governments say they can do it. But they did say there are a range of different scenarios being looked at. They've made it quite clear. And that's a bit general, but it's basically confirming the story that people were denying. What Steve Hocking said to the footy bosses last week was that we're looking... He described them as carnivals, mini carnivals.
Yeah. But you know what, Cara, that was a story that was right at the time, and then better ideas have come along. And this one has got a little bit of momentum now because it actually makes a fair bit of sense. Lee Matthews was on 3AW, was it, last night with you guys? And he had a bit to say about it. Lee took a different perspective.
I'm beginning to think we're being played as suckers, the public. I reckon the football competitions, both the NRL and the AFL, are deliberately leaking stuff just to keep us talking about the sport. They got no idea, I wouldn't have thought, when it's going to be ticked. Are we the victims of deliberate leaking for PR reasons?
This notion of the media being used follows up from the notion a week or two ago that we're also desperate to talk about something. We're either making stuff up or inventing stories that don't exist. I just completely reject that. There was a dispute between the players and the AFL. The AFL are looking at these hubs, and I just don't think the AFL would be that cynical as to cause angst in the footy community.
Yeah, I ran the story on Triple M on Monday because I know it was something was involved, because I spoke to the AFL, but it wasn't because we were breaking ranks. We spoke about this on this very show, the first show we did, that this was something that was there, and it has now moved along. And as we're seeing the flattening out of the coronavirus, we, the AFL, that is, the whole AFL family, have to start planning for the day we can do it.
And I think because there's a lot of meetings, there's the Cabinet, there's the Presidents, it gets out to the media before the official statements come out from the AFL. And I think that's the really difficult situation. It gets ahead of itself before that statement. If that statement had to come out first on the hub and then we discuss it, Patrick's looking $1 million. But if you're discussing it before you know the official AFL position, which tends to happen, well, then you can be made to look silly.
Well, it tends to happen because we are making it up, because every day the whole thing changes. And I don't think there's any
Never has the term 1 week at a time been more apt, and it's even 1 day at a time.